Hello, welcome to this lesson where we're going to look at time zones. So here we have a world map, and it's been split in this map into its 24 different time zones. Now we have time zones around the world so that at the point of the day when the sun's in the middle of the sky, it's going to be 12 o'clock. And so that hopefully we have sun for the middle hours of our day, and we have night at similar hours all around the world. Now you'll notice on this map that we have numbers at the bottom with pluses or minuses, and this here is essentially a plus or minus 0. So this is the point where we measure all time from, at least in Greenwich Mean Time or GMT. This line here is sort of where the prime meridian goes. The prime meridian is just a line of longitude which passes from the north to south pole through Greenwich. And Greenwich is the point where we work out all our times from. You can move across different lines, and let's say you're here in this time zone, so any of this purple country here, any of that purple country, you're going to add 4 hours to whatever hour it is in Greenwich. If you go back, let's say to this yellow part, you're going to go up, follow that. Anytime here or here is going to be -5 on the hours at Greenwich. You'll also notice that time zones aren't necessarily straight. Here we don't have the time zone completely drawn, but for example this green time zone here, -4, you can see that it goes something around here like this. And the reason that we do this is because the world is round, so it's not going to be quite straight when we flatten it out anyway. But it's also because in one country, it's generally a good idea to have the same time across the country, or to split it up into chunks. But those chunks don't necessarily line up with these exact lines along here. So our time zones are often a bit crooked. So here we've been asked a question to find out the time difference between Greenwich and Sydney. In an exam, you'd have the places labelled. I'm just going to show you where they are. So hopefully you will know that Sydney is here in Australia. It would also be good to remember that Greenwich is in the UK over here. And we're trying to work out what's the time difference between the two. So to do that, we look at these numbers down the bottom. Remember Greenwich was a 0. And Sydney is over here at +10. So we can see that there's a difference of 10 hours as you go along here. You'll also pass through 10 different time zones, which is how the times work. So the way that we could word this is we could say that Sydney is 10 hours ahead of Greenwich, or that Greenwich was 10 hours behind Sydney. So now we've been asked to find the time difference between Egypt and Sydney. Now Egypt is this country here, and Sydney still is over here. Now, this time we're not starting at 0, we're starting at +2, and we're going to +10. And we just need to work out how many hours we're going to move to get from our +2 to our +10. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're going to go +8 hours is how we get from Egypt to Sydney. So you could say that Sydney is 8 hours ahead of Egypt, or you could say that Egypt is 8 hours behind Sydney. That means that the sun is going to hit Sydney, say at its peak or at the beginning of the morning, 8 hours before it hits here. Now the sun isn't actually moving this way. You know, the world is rotating, but for the sake of this, you can just think of it as the sun moving. Okay, so now can you find the time difference between China and Sydney? So China is over here. My pen is stopped. China is over here. Sydney is still down here. Okay, so China is this green here, which correlates to the green down here. Sydney is the +10. So all you have to do is jump forward 2 hours or 2 time zones. So you could have either said that Sydney is 2 hours ahead of China, or that China is 2 hours behind Sydney. Okay, so now we're getting some more specific questions. And they just have an extra step in them. So we've been given the time in Sydney, and we have to work out what time it would be in Greenwich. So as before, we need to work out how many hours we have to add or subtract, and then we just add or subtract those to our time. In this case, our 9 a.m. Okay, my pen is back. So again, Sydney and Greenwich. We need to move 10 time zones. So if we go this way, we're going to plus 10. If we go this way, from Sydney, we're going to subtract 10, because the opposite of plus is minus. So we subtract 10. So we know the time in Sydney, and we're trying to work out the time in Greenwich, so we're going to go on the bottom one, the subtract one. So we know that's 9 a.m. in Sydney. If we subtract 10 hours from 9 a.m., we're going to get around to 11 p.m. So we can say that it's 11 p.m. in Greenwich when it's 9 a.m. in Sydney. Now to check that, you could then add 10 on again to go back the other way. So if we add 10, we get 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're going to get to 9 a.m. And it's always good to check your answers for these ones. Okay, so now it's your turn. If it's 8 a.m. in Greenwich, so remember Greenwich is over here, what time is it over here in Sydney? Okay, so again, the difference between these two countries is 10. You could jump across each one. That was incorrect, but if we go over here, we're going to plus 10. If we go this way, we're going to minus 10. This time we're starting over here in Greenwich, so we're going to jump 10 to the right to get to Sydney. So it's 8 a.m. in Greenwich, we get 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1 p.m., 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's going to be 6 p.m. in Sydney. Now, again, we could check that by going backwards. So we start at 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. So we've gone back to 8 a.m. So we've checked our answer. So it would be 6 p.m. in Sydney. Okay, so can you work out if it's 2 p.m. in Sydney, which is over here, what time it is in Cairo, which is the capital of Egypt? Okay, so it's 2 p.m. over here. Now you could remember one way of doing it is that 2 p.m. in 24-hour time is 1400. Now to go from our plus 10 to our plus 2, we just need to subtract 8 hours. So if you subtract 8 hours from 1400, you're going to get to 600 or 6 a.m. You could also just jump along like we did before. So go 2, 1, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we get to 6 a.m. You can then check your answer from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, and we get back to 2 p.m. So we can be pretty certain that the time in Cairo is going to be 6 a.m. when it's 2 p.m. in Sydney. Okay, again, if it's 3 p.m. in Cairo over here, what time is it going to be in Sydney? Okay, so if it's 3 p.m. in Cairo, I'm going to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We get to 11 p.m. in Sydney. We'll check. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Get back to 3 p.m. So our time in Sydney is going to be 11 p.m. So hopefully you now understand how to read and understand time zones. If you have any questions, please bring them to me.